Hey everybody, JK here from Animator Island. Welcome to today's live stream. I'm going to be working in Procreate today and doing some experiments, and pretty soon I'm hoping to do one of those short videos for Animator Island that talks a little about art experimentation. So let me dive into that a little bit before I get to that short eventually. So it's really important that you experiment when you're an artist, trying new mediums, new styles, new techniques, all sorts of stuff. Because what I've realized, and I should have realized a long time ago, is that we have developed into a culture where the output has become so important because of things like social media and Instagram. Well, Instagram is social media, but getting attention online and things like that. The final product has become so important that a lot of times we'll not experiment as much because we want to make sure that it's perfect for our audience or whatever. So this past week or so, I guess it's only been a week, feels longer, I've been trying to do these smaller pieces that are just shorter. I mean, shorter in the neighborhood of like 4 to 5 hours, but still shorter than a full illustration. And I've been trying to just play with them more and do stuff that I wouldn't normally do. I've been working at making sure that the colors are way bolder than I would normally use, because in previous live streams, we've talked about my love of bold colors, but how I never use them because I'm just too timid when it comes to color usage. So I've been trying to push things a lot more, and it's really helped, and it's made me really excited to sit down and do the art, which is something that I've always struggled with over my career. Is, it's been so much work and I just not want to do it, but now I'm like anxious to go do it. So just something to keep in mind. If you've fallen out of practice with experimenting, I highly recommend you get back into it. When we're kids, that's what we do. I mean, we grab these new mediums and these different types of materials and things, and we just try stuff, and we don't worry about if it's good or bad. Really, we learn to worry if it's good or bad, and that's not always a good thing. So just something to keep in mind. It's really important. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of experimentation again. Let me share my screen here, the old iPad, and I'll walk you through the couple things that I've been doing recently. So this piece, this is the one that I drew it in, but I can also, well, I'll just leave it here because I can zoom in. This piece is the first attempt that I did at this sort of experimentation thing that I've been working on. I wanted to do something, kind of an extreme close-up shot, use some of the things I've picked up while I'm developing my own style through those videos and those exercises. And this is kind of what came about. This is, again, not something I would necessarily traditionally do, because I tend to, first of all, work much more zoomed out. Like I usually don't crop quite so closely as this. And the color choices, I went bold, I just tried stuff. And even that I toned back a little bit, because originally it was even bolder and I was like, no, that's too much. And then this kind of lighting effect that I've put on there, that's something I very rarely do. And then I also added a little bit of glow to the eyes, which you can kind of see a little bit. Again, not stuff that I'm used to doing. So I think it was really useful in that sense. And I think it actually turned out pretty well. It's not my favorite piece I've ever done, but it's definitely, pretty high quality given what I'm used to producing much more rough stuff. So it was nice to have something that I could finish polishing and stuff like that. When let me talk for a minute about the polishing stuff. When I got to the end of this, I had everything inked and added the color, and everything was flat color and maybe a little bit of shading. That's when most of the experimentation really got started, because I wanted to try and add stuff that I wouldn't normally do and push things and try stuff. So, oh, Dylan's here and says hi. Hey, Dylan. So with this particular piece, like I said, some of the stuff was the glowing effect, the lighting effects, things like that. but also I tried a variety of different line stuff. So let me see if I have. Yeah. So I tried this version, which you can see is very subtly different, but I tried using different colors for the lines instead. I ended up not going with that one. And then I also tried it just in black. Well, this is originally, and it's actually, I think it's a really deep blue line. But I tried it in, tried the line colors in a bunch of different styles just to see what would happen. And, I think some worked. I think they all worked, right? But I had to kind of pick one. And that was really tricky for me because to settle on one was an experience in itself. So I ended up with this one, which is just this kind of brownish maroon line color tone. And I think it worked well for the piece, but that's kind of where I went with that. So then this is the one that I just finished yesterday. And this is probably one of my favorite pieces that I've ever done. I said on Twitter, if you showed this image to me of maybe 20 years ago, even, I'd have been like, that's amazing. Oh, I would love to do that sort of thing. So I have to remind myself that even though it's not perfect and it's not everything I want it to be, to really be content with how much progress I've made, even in just the last year, as I've been working on polish and finish and changing my own art style. But I really like this piece. I only did it yesterday, so it may come about that in a few weeks, I don't like it as much. But right now, I'm a big fan. I, again, went with these bolder color choices. I didn't hold back on line weight and things. I really just went for it in a lot of ways, and I was able to stay loose and stay comfortable. And when this started out, the original version, which this is actually not even the original version, because this is like the final rough that I did before I went in and changed things. The original, which we're going to get to today because I'm going to do one live, is terrible. It was terrible. It was awful. It was ugly. I really wanted to quit 20 minutes in, 10 minutes in, or whatever it was. It was just terrible. And I just kept pushing and I kept tweaking and I kept messing with stuff. And eventually I got to this one and I'm like, this isn't terrible. It's not my favorite, but it's not terrible. And Hiley's here and Golden Crows is here. Hey, y'all. Anyway, but I went with it. And then I did, what was this? Yeah. And I tweaked some things again, just little movements around. And then I went back and I did my tie down. I did my tie down drawing over top of that. As animators, or probably as animators, you know that a tie down drawing is, in traditional animation, an artist would lay a new piece of paper over top of their old piece of paper where they worked out their roughs, and they would do a tie down, which is a much cleaner version of that rough. So this was my much cleaner version of the original rough. And then I went through and did my inking, which should be in here. Just have to turn everything off. Turn everything off. Hang on. Is that everything? Yep. So this is the original inking that I did after the tie down. We got to this stage, and that's where I took that to its final illustration with all of its fancy effects and things. You'll note, maybe, you can note, after I pointed out especially, that I've blurred the edges, right? So to do that, which I don't think I'll do today, but I think it came out really as an interesting effect. To do that, I duplicated the image, which is this one, and then I erased away I duplicated the whole image, and then I blurred it, the whole thing, and then I erased away the places that I wanted to be sharp. I think there's other ways to do that, but that's the way I did it, and I think that it turned out, pretty well with that effect. So I'm a fan of how this one turned out. I'm glad I did it. sometimes you hit a sort of flow state. If you've ever experienced that in art, it's really nice state to feel. I had like 2 or 3 hours solid just to work on this piece, and I hit that flow state and things were just jamming and I was enjoying myself. And so something really nice came out of it, I think. So that's where we're at right now. And so today I decided I was going to do a third piece in this sort of series, right? We started with the one with the greenish tone hair, and now we have this orangish red hair. And so I want to do another piece in this quote unquote series, and I'm going to just try stuff and I'm going to experiment and just see what happens. So I've already set up that file, and what we have here is I have my reference on the left side with just some things I want to keep in mind. So to kind of go through, let me make kind of a notes layer here, and we'll get started with stuff. Okay. So to start out here with, this top image is going to be my main photo reference. This is the pose that I'm going to use for this piece. I'm just drawing inspiration from that pose. I'm not necessarily drawing this particular woman. I'm just taking that pose and taking aspects of it and trying to incorporate that into the drawing. And then if we move down to this second one here, we'll zoom in a smidge. You'll see that these lines are a little different than what I normally do. I really like clean, sharp lines. So I've been using a brush in Procreate called Baskerville, which is right here, down at the bottom or halfway. I've been using Baskerville, and I'm really getting used to it and I'm really enjoying it. So I think Baskerville is going to be the go-to brush that I use for a lot of my future inking. TMKOC says hi. Hello. And feel free to chat away in the chat, have conversations or ask questions or whatever you like. At any rate, so I've been using Baskerville as an inking tool for the last couple drawings, and I really like it. But because I'm trying to experiment, because I'm just doing stuff to learn and to grow and to push myself a bit, I want to try something more like this, where we have it a bit more of a painterly style. I'm not sure what brush I'm going to need to use to achieve effects like these lines and such, but it definitely isn't as sharp as Baskerville is. So it's probably going to be more of just a standard round brush, maybe. I don't know. We're going to have to play with stuff and see what happens. But I'm going to try and do my final work more or closer to this sort of style in terms of line quality and maybe shading and things. We'll see what happens. It might fail horribly. I don't know. And then last at the bottom here, we have a picture of, I believe it's Bowserette. So in my work, I tend to almost never do blonde characters for whatever reason. It's not my thing. Whatever it is. I don't know. I've never sat down and analyzed why. It just never seems to turn out that way. So this time I was like, okay, we're experimenting, trying something different. I'm going to totally go for a blonde character. See what happens. I don't know, because I never do it. And that's why you do these things. So I'm going to probably steal some colors from that one, because I don't even know where to begin with in terms of blonde characters. And Highly asks, are these references outside the drawing, or is that border just drawn on? The border is just drawn on. You'll see here that I have a layer called frame. I just drew a square, and I'm going to work within that square. I find that it's very helpful for me to work this way, where you have your reference on the side that I can hide at any time. So later on when I'm inking and stuff, I'll hide that. I won't have to worry about it. And because I'm working in a square, I just like having some extra room. It keeps me looser, if that makes sense, because what I can do is and we'll get to the actual drawing, but just for a minute, I can go ahead and start with some sort of, character shape or whatever, lines and things. And, I just make this ugly so that I can get to what I mean. So I draw my terrible rough, and then I can go ahead and work on my composition after that. So because I want to crop things closely, I might move this character like this, right? And that's something that I feel more comfortable with if I do this whole framing within the image itself. And then from there, I can, change back to eraser brush. Then from there, I can go back and erase out all of the lines outside of it like this. And I have my final composition. And this is just a process that works really well for me. Everybody's going to have a little bit of a different process in that regard, but I found that this works really well for experimentation, and especially if I'm working in a kind of weird format, like if I want to do square or if I want to do like a very vertical piece or whatever. This helps me a lot because I can change stuff and I don't feel as locked in. You know what I mean? So it's almost like if you have a sketchbook, you really don't treat a sketchbook page as though it's the entire image. Usually you're usually sketching within that page and then maybe you frame it out afterwards or something like that. So I like this method, and that's why I have the frame on here like that. I don't always work that way, but often now I tend to. Okay, whoops, moving stuff around. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Now, as I said briefly before, these early sketches, this early step is gonna be hideous, almost assuredly. That's okay. That's what we do. We stick with free and loose, and then we go back in and we nudge stuff and tweak stuff. That's the beauty of digital work. You don't have to get it right the first time. So let's use the tool that we have. So I'm going to start out with this tinderbox brush, which is what I use for sketching everything. And I'll probably go a little bit quiet for a minute while I'm doing this drawing, and then we can talk about stuff after that. So see, speaking of back to kind of the framing thing, I have not placed this where I want it in the final drawing. I could tell that already. So I'm going to go ahead and move it to the middle a little bit. What did I draw over there? Sorry. There's apparently something on the screen. Should I get rid of? Nope. I apparently made a mark that I shouldn't have made. There we go. So I'm going to just go ahead and move that slightly so that I have more room. Again, the wonders of working digitally. This is the benefit, so we might as well do it. All right, continuing along. So I haven't decided yet if I want to do this flower in the hair thing, or if I want to get the flower to be slightly smaller, which is what I'm thinking. I mean, this is very cool with a giant flower, but I think that I might go a little more subtle and do a flower kind of here instead. I think that that's just kind of what I'm looking for out of this one. Okay. So here again, I've started with this pretty miserably ugly rough drawing, and I'm going to go ahead and tweak things now and start moving stuff around, and then we'll go back and mess with some other stuff. I want to try and keep this series being kind of this extreme close-up. So I'm going to enlarge it more than not only normally would I, but also more than what is kind of reasonable for this particular hairstyle and this particular image. I'm cutting off a lot. So that's just something that is going to happen. And I kind of have to deal with it after the fact. All this stuff that I wanted to include is now not going to be included. So out it goes. Because again, we're experimenting, we're trying stuff. And so suddenly we're in a very different place than we were before. We don't get that nice hair on the side there. So I'm going to have to change stuff and tweak things as I go and figure some stuff out. So let's get away from the we're going to get away from the original reference image just a little bit now. And I'm going to see what I can do here. And so things will keep getting rougher and more out there and just messier as I go. Oh, Elazor is here. Hey, how's it going? I'm glad you got to stop by. Is that how you pronounce it? Elazor? Elizur. I always see the name and I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what that is. Anyway, so as I was saying, we're just going to keep getting rougher and messier and uglier in this early stage because that's just kind of my workflow where I just, especially when I'm experimenting, I just want to try stuff. I just want to try it and see what happens and mess with stuff and kind of go from there. I should really not be on my inking erase brush. I need to have my larger eraser. Okay, so I kind of have to step back now and look at this and see what's working, what's not working. A lot of it is not working, but that's okay because we can fix things. So this is sort of the stage that I was talking about. This is the stage where, especially when it comes to experimenting, I just want to give up. And this will happen a lot for me. These early stages is, Eli is easier. Good deal. We'll go with Eli. So this is the stage where I'm just like, this is ugly. It's not working. I just want to stop. But you don't get better by stopping like that. And so what I will do, sorry, my phone is exploding over here. Oh, ignoring that. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to drop this down in opacity. We're going to start a new layer, and then I'm going to go over top, and I'm going to try and I'm still keeping things rough and loose, but I'm going to try and fix some things that just aren't working for me, and then I can go back afterwards and try and just pull the pieces. It's almost like I'm doing a first tie down, like a rough tie down. Golden Crows says, when you decide to try a new thing, do you get motivated to do it when you see it, to do it when you see others use it, or is it spontaneous? When you say try a new thing, speak to me a little bit more about that, because I don't want to answer a wrong question here that you're not actually asking. For example, when I came across this piece right here, I saw somebody who used this particular style that I really appreciated. It's not necessarily something I want to do forever, but I was like, oh, that's really nice. So I saved it so that in the future I could try something like it. So if that's kind of what you mean. Now, when it comes to the day that I try it, right, because I saved this like months ago, that's a little more spontaneous. That's where I'll just see kind of how I'm feeling that day and say, wonder what I should try today. And then I went back and I saw this one and I was like, okay, let's try that today. No time like the present. And that worked out okay. That we're going to do this one for today. But that's kind of how it works for me. If I see somebody use some sort of effect that I really like, I will usually just save it. I usually do not immediately go to a canvas. So clarified style, medium. Yeah, so if I see a style or a medium that I really like, I will traditionally, I'll save it. A lot of times in the past, what has happened is I'll save stuff that I want to try and do. I have a whole folder of it from like years ago on my computer. I think the folder is called interesting styles to try or something like that. And I never went back and tried a single one of them because I hadn't, again, been practicing via experimentation. I hadn't been pushing myself to try these new things. I've been stuck trying to just produce work that I could show to people. And now I'm like, yeah, whatever. If something comes of it, great. If it doesn't, too bad. Eli says I can relate to that. So now that I'm trying these little experiments like this piece, just a tiny little square experiment, it's allowed me to go to some of these styles and say, yeah, I'm going to try that this time. It might fail horribly, but I've only given a few hours to it. So whatever. And if the drawing underneath is really good, then maybe I could take it and do it in a different style later. Go back and re-ink. All right, so I like this face shape a little bit more than I did the last one, so that's a good thing. We're going to get instead of a perfect circle for the flower, let's give it a little bit of an angle in itself. So we're going to have this flower be kind of curved in there, which I think will add a little bit more visual interest. And might need to move it slightly up here. I kind of like that angle. Let's go with that. So again, we're just trying stuff. This hair is going to drive me crazy. Let's ignore it for now and just, it's a terrible thing. Don't ignore it. I'm going to ignore it for now. We'll just get this stuff, these lines in. One thing that these experiments have taught me is that I really, really like a nice curved shoulder line quality. Like that's just a spot I love. If you look at the other experiments I did, they have this curved shoulder element and I really, really like it. So I'm going to keep it on this one. I just looked up at the screen for my reference. It's in front of you. Got this line here, so I'm going to probably keep that. And then we need to decide on outfit. What do I want to do there? I don't know. We'll get back to that. Just leave it without for now. So this is all working pretty well. Now here's another quick tip for you. In the event that things are working well and you want to stay rough and loose and stuff like that, but you're a little bit worried in the back of your mind or deep down inside that you're going to mess something up, just go ahead and duplicate whatever you're on and then leave the old one and just mess with the new one. Like anytime you want to do that, just do that. That helps me a ton. I cannot tell you the last time I went back to an old version, but it alleviates some of the stress for me. It really shouldn't be stressful. I mean, we're doing art, but it does. It just hits me and I'm like, oh, what if I mess it up? whatever it is about my character that causes that to happen, it does. So I just duplicate layers all the time and I leave them to the side, and then I can come back to them, but I never do. But it helps. It helps clear my mind, and it's like a safety net, right? If you're very good on the high wire act at the circus, you probably don't need the net, but having it there is pretty nice because just in case, you just never know. So I have that rough now that I can just leave there, and I'll be more content to have it there. This part is not going to play nicely with me, I could just tell, but that's all right. We'll figure it out as we go. All right, so if we kind of look at this, when you're doing hair, and that's something that I'm working on practicing. That's another reason I'm doing these experiments. But one of the things that you need to know when you're looking at hair is kind of big shapes. So here we have, well, let's do the biggest one first. We have this giant shape right here, right? And then we have kind of this extra shape that comes in here. This is its own individual shape almost. So we can build on layers like this, and it really helps to understand the hair and to work from what either the reference gives you or the way that, you know, hair naturally works. So these are sort of things that you can look at. I kind of like that purple highlights. Anyway, all right, do I want to get rid of that? I could probably leave it for now. Anyway, so when I'm doing this hair here, I want to keep that in mind. We're going to work on these big shapes first, and then we'll go in and do the other aspects of the hair. So I will go in and add this kind of bit that comes up and over, and we'll add this extra strand, and maybe we'll tuck that behind her ear. Why not? See what happens with that. All right, so that works. Okay, I did all the fun bits, and now I have to deal with the stuff that I don't want to deal with. Which always what happens. So let's go in, and first of all, let me clean this up just a little bit more because I feel like it's getting out of hand a little bit. All right. So let's figure out this. Here we have on hers kind of an extra line here. So let's add that back in. I got to watch my tangents because it's the tricky thing about working so up close is that you really have to watch where things hit the edge of your page. So for example, right here, I'm very dangerously close to a tangent and I don't want that. So I'll probably have to move it around later or fix it. But for now, it's probably okay. All right. And you probably can't see because I'm far away. I'm squinting my eyes right now in case this helps your process. I'm squinting my eyes and I'm just kind of looking at shapes and forms and trying to see proportion without thinking about what it is so that I can try and make the whole thing cohesive and really work. I think we keep this curve in here, but I may drag it straight through. No, I don't like that. That's all right, I guess. I'm going to be unhappy about the fact that I don't have as much room on this other side. I could just tell. It's going to bother me. Actually, instead of doing that, let's put that back in, and then I'm I'm gonna move stuff around a bit. Yeah, so the whole thing is going to have to be recomposed because right now, No Wolf says, "Can I ask annoying why my art bad questions here?" You can ask whatever questions you want, Wolf. Go for it. I can't promise I'll have the answers, but I'll give you what I can. Yeah, if there's something specific, you just ask away. Somebody else might be able to jump in and answer certain things. If typically, analyzing your own art is very hard, but also really useful, right? So it's something to sit back and think about what the worst part about something you're doing is, and ask yourself. I'm happy to answer the questions. Don't get me wrong. You can let me know if there's some specific area or something, but if you sit back and ask yourself those questions. So while I'm sitting here and looking at this, I could tell that the skull shape is way too big. It's just too big. It's not working. And that's actually going to solve one of my other problems, because my issue here is that I'm going off the screen, off my composition. So I'm going to kind of shrink the skull shape down and fix that a little bit. It won't stick with my original rough, so I'm probably going to have to get rid of that in a second. But now this the head shape is smaller, or the skull shape is smaller. It's more manageable. This is closer to what I wanted anyway, so we're in better shape here. Get rid of that one. Now, I didn't really save. I mean, we kind of saved, right, this original. But this is, again, I think this is really important. This is one of those things that I wish had sunk in faster. So if I can give this to anybody else, it's really, I think, really useful. So much of art is just about redoing the art. So much of it is about trying and changing things and just messing with stuff. Because again, this is ugly. I don't like this at all. This original ugly rough that I did is not pretty. It's just not nice. But then we go to this one and I'm getting somewhere. Like, this is nicer to me. I like this more. Is it perfect? No, I still got issues with it and it needs fixed. And there's a lot of things that we need to do. But hopefully you can kind of see the monumental difference between that original and this one. And that's just a matter of time and giving it space and letting yourself fail and that sort of stuff. So, okay, let's talk for a second what Wolf has to say. To which skill are random doodles tied to? Design principles, or is it more of a general mileage? I don't like my doodles and don't see how to make them better other than just drawing more aimlessly. All right, let me pop this up for a second and we can talk about this question, and then we'll get back to drawing in a second. Okay, what skills are random doodles tied to? So I would say that there are two sorts of doodles, right? The tricky thing about art is that we all have different terms for different things. So sometimes I'll see somebody who does a digital painting and they'll literally post it as, I did this sketch today. That's not a sketch. That's a digital painting. But when we confuse terms like that, it just gets loose and weird. So when we talk about doodles, we have a couple different things that we might mean. And you can tell me if one of these specifics is yours. If not, we'll continue on. But if I sit down and I'm doodling, my mind really isn't on what I'm doing. I'm just kind of making marks on a page. I might make little funny faces, things like that. Doodling is what I would consider you do in the corner of your math book when you probably shouldn't be drawing in your math book, if that makes sense. And then you have the sort of doodling where you're kind of working out ideas, where your thought is much more involved. You know, you're conscious about what you're putting down, and you might not have a plan. You might not be thinking, I'm going to draw this specific thing, but you at least have a direction in terms of your brain power. You're putting your mind to something. 1 second. Yeah, okay, just checking the chat. So that's like a second kind of doodle. And then you have this almost third kind of doodle, which I would never call a doodle, but some people do, where you're kind of doing what I just did, where you have an underdrawing. You have something to start with, because honestly, the worst thing for most artists is the blank page. So you're getting something down so that you can mess with it and you can tweak stuff and you can change things. And I would call that more of a rough than I would a doodle, because to me, doodling is much more mindless, and doing a rough drawing or even a bunch of rough drawings like thumbnails, that's less mindless. You have to really think about what you're doing. So when it comes to random doodles of the sort where you're just kind of, mindlessly doodling on a page or something like that, I think that is almost like a kind of a meditative thing where you're just letting it's almost like humming, but visually, right? Like if you're just humming, you might not be humming a specific tune, or if you're whistling, a lot of people will just whistle randomly. That's just this kind of mindless activity. And I think that if it's tied to a skill, that skill would be kind of relaxation, meditation, calming the mind, just being a little bit. Now, when it comes to the sort of doodles, it leans more toward doing roughs or thumbnails. In that case, the skill that you're building there is discernment, right? It's intuition. I did a video a while back. I'm pretty sure it's a video and not an article on artistic intuition. I'll try and remember to link to it in the description of this video in case you're watching afterwards or if you want to come back. But artistic intuition is this thing inside of us where we start to understand these principles that used to just be what people told us, but now we like grasp them. We're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense now. Like it's just, you don't even think about it in words so much. It just intuitively starts to affect you. So I think that little roughs and thumbnails can help build our artistic intuition really, really well. Now, let's move on to this second part of your question, because this is a really, really important aspect. You say design principles, or is it more general mileage? When we're talking about what we call pencil mileage, right, which is putting the work in, you have to be really careful, because if we're just kind of mindlessly doodling, or even if we're doing very rough stuff, it doesn't always count towards pencil mileage. And that's something that I don't think is told enough. People don't teachers tend to not stress enough that not all practice is equal. And so we get in our head, oh, I'm just going to go, sit for an hour and doodle, and that's pencil mileage. No, it's really not. There can be great things that are gained from doing that. Like I said, you can calm your mind. You can kind of go into this meditative state when you're just mindlessly doodling, but that does not count as the more traditional practice that they want you to get when it comes to pencil mileage, right? So let me give you kind of an analogy. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't, but let me try. If you were learning the piano, you would sit down, and traditionally you'll sit down and you'll practice scales, right? And so scales are, you practice which fingers go on which keys. You go up the scales, back down the scales. You work on your timing, things like that, each individual thing at a time. But that is dedicated practice that you are honing a skill. If instead you sat down at the piano and you just started plunking on keys at random, not even at random, but just all over the place, you weren't practicing something, you were just hitting notes, you might stumble across an amazing melody or a chord that you were like, wow, that's a great chord. I really like that. It might happen, but it happened by accident. And you weren't really practicing the piano. You were just playing with the piano almost, if that makes sense. So when it comes to pencil mileage, switching back to art, when it comes to pencil mileage, you have to practice like your scales, essentially. You have to practice on purpose, with intent, with a quality mindset. It's not going to help you to just kind of do stuff at random. That's not to say don't do stuff at random, because experimentation pieces like I'm doing now, sometimes you just get great stuff that comes out of it. But you definitely want to practice intentionally, if that makes sense. Yeah, Yo Melodis showed up and says hi. Hello. All right, and the last little bit you have here. I don't like my doodles, and I don't see how to make them better other than drawing more aimlessly. Okay, well, that's probably the number one. So just from this last sentence, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna try and unpack this a little bit. From this last sentence, what it seems to me is happening is what I did, and this is bad, so don't do it. But I did it, so all is not lost. I used to also do this sort of aimless uh, trying to improve, where I would not know what was wrong, but I knew something was wrong, and that's good because that means your art intuition is there. You just don't know how to fix it yet, right? So since you don't know how to fix it, you just start trying stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it will serve you better if you know how to fix it. And so that's what I would recommend that you work on next, is figuring out how to fix stuff and what it is that does that makes it better. So let me go back to my drawing here for a second, and we'll talk about it in regards to what I just said. So with this original drawing I did, this one, up the opacity again, I knew that something was off. I didn't like it. Something was wrong. I wasn't sure what, but something in my artistic intuition said, this isn't right. So internally, I kind of stepped back and said, okay, what is it that isn't working for me with this particular thing? Oh, and Hailey has a really good point, which is often what happens with Hailey. Says flipping and mirroring the drawing is a good start. You see the errors easier. That is absolutely true. I usually use that technique once I'm further along, but you can use it early. That's one that I almost save for, like, okay, I'm pretty happy with this. Now I'm going to mirror it, and then all the problems show up. But if it works for your workflow, go ahead and use that early. It's really, really useful. I'll tackle this comment real quick. Yo Melodis says, you need way more support and views. I'm trying to become an animator and trying to go to art college next month. Well, I wish you all the best. Art college is an experience, and I think that's the best way to approach it. Go experience art college. Get as much out of it as you can, and try not to pay too much for it, because otherwise you'll have debt for a very long time. But I'm glad I went to art school. It didn't quite do what I thought it would, but there's a lot of good things there. Anyway, all right, going back to this. So mirroring is a very good way. But when I look at this image, I think to myself, something is wrong here. I don't know what. But because I've slowly built up my art intuition, I could take pieces and say, do I like this? Do I not like this? This sort of thing. So when I saw this and I went back over it, I knew that, and this is obviously skewed now because I've moved stuff around. But I knew that that this face shape it wasn't working quite right. So I went back in, and I'm trying to carve out the spaces that feel better. In a sense, that's a little bit still that experimentation and randomness, right? But because I'm intentionally trying to fix one spot instead of the whole thing, I feel like you're going to have success quicker, because you start to see what worked and what didn't and that sort of thing. Same thing with the hair. When the hair wasn't working, I'm like, okay, what parts of the hair do work? And so remember down here a minute ago, or a while ago now, I went in and tried it as one big shape, and I didn't like that. So I was like, nope, I was right the first time. This needs to be more than one shape. And so I went back in and messed with it. And so even here now, while we're talking, I can see, oh, you know what would be nice is if this part was in front of this back part. That wasn't a random change. That wasn't me just trying stuff. That was me saying, okay, this one little area needs fixed. What can I do to make that one little area better? And what I could do was do some overlapping, which always adds more dimensionality to a drawing. So it's stuff like that that I think is really going to be useful for you Wolf to try and answer that question that you asked a long time ago. I think this would be really useful for you because it's going to help you get the actual pencil mileage in instead of just hoping for the best. The more we can build that artistic intuition, which comes from practice, but also studying what other people have done and things like that. There's a lot of ways to build artistic intuition. But the more we can do that, the more we're generally going to have an easier time when it comes to fixing the things that are wrong. Now, all that being said, there's the old adage, you don't know what you don't know, which means especially if early on, you just won't know what's wrong. Like, you know that it doesn't look what you want it to look like, but you just don't know what's wrong. And that's where having a dedicated mentor can really, really help. And that's where Yoma Lotus, that's where I really recommend art school. Go to your teachers, go to them when you're in art school, because they are there for you. And take your pieces of art up to them with an open mind and set them in front and say, how do I fix this? And then watch what they do. A really good teacher will sit there for a long time and just show you exactly where the problems are. So, it's not always possible for everybody to have a mentor because of situations. That's just how it works. But if you can find one who's above you in ability, it really, really helps, because they'll show you some stuff that's wrong and it'll accelerate your progress. It doesn't mean you can't do it without them, but it'll really accelerate your progress. Okay. Hope that answered your question a bit. I'm going to, so I'm thinking of this stuff in my head, but I'm going to say it out loud so that you can understand what I'm going through internally here. Right now, this composition isn't working for me. There's a couple issues with it that I don't like. One of the issues that I can tell I don't like is this area over here. Something about this isn't working for me. I don't know what it is, but something isn't. My initial reaction for me is to move this over and get rid of that. Because then I'm like, okay, it's fixed because it's gone now. That's not necessarily a wrong answer, but here's the problem with this answer. I have now left all this negative space. And just in case there's somebody who's not sure what I mean, this area that's not the character is negative space. And you have to keep in mind negative space when you're working too. Apologies for the people who already know this stuff, but I figure it doesn't hurt to hear it again. Because I've left all this negative space, I've now gotten away from what I was attempting to do in the beginning, which was to do this extreme close-up of a face where there are things that are cut off. So I have a decision to make. I can abandon that initial goal that I had, and I can stick with what I've got here. Or I can push myself by enlarging this again and cutting more off again and trying to do what I initially set out to do. And if you'll give me a minute, I have to think about that, because this is a hard decision and a hard moment for this particular piece. And this is why I don't usually do all of this live. Usually I'm just sitting there, or I lay face down on the floor and lament that I have to make a really hard decision. So I don't usually do it live. But this is where I would honestly put down my pencil and I would just think for a bit. And if you don't do that with your art, I recommend it. Just stop for a minute every once in a while. Really give it some thought. So the question is, do I want to abandon what I was intending to do, or do I want to proceed with more negative space than I ever intended to have here? I really like that left-hand shape. This area, this curve and this shape, I like. It makes me happy. And if I were to get rid of that, some part of me would be sad. But the question is, do I worry about that? Like, do I appease myself by keeping that? Or do I stick to that hard goal I set before, which is going to probably teach me more, but I'll be sad that I lost that really nice curve. And I don't know if I have an answer yet. I don't know what are we at? We're at an hour about on this live stream. So I'm probably going to have to stop soon for lunch anyway. Seems like a cop-out to stop here because I won't have made a decision. But I'll be perfectly honest with you. Here, I'll swap this for while we're talking this last thing. Eli says, follow your heart, JK. Yeah, well, my heart doesn't always get it right. It's not that. I shouldn't say that. It's more that because I started this trying to be uncomfortable, right? Do stuff that's not necessarily what I would enjoy. That's the part that's hard, because it's almost like if you get a school assignment, right, with some advanced algebra on it, and you're not very good at advanced algebra, you're like, well, that is the assignment, but what if I just did multiplication tables instead? Because I like those better. You know what I mean? So I have to decide if I'm up for that or not. Riley says, looks okay to me. Yeah, I think it looks okay too, and that's my problem. Like, I could break it and then have to fix it again, but I'm not sure if I want to or not. So here's what I'm thinking. I think I'm going to leave it this way. Instead of enlarging it again, it won't be what I set out to do. It's not going to end up being like this one, right? Because it's going to have too much negative space. It's going to, and so here's the other thing. This one is even more in an extreme close-up. And so what's happening, and I can see it happening now, is that I'm slowly getting further and further back toward my comfort zone. And that worries me because I don't want to do that. So here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to call it that decision, and I'm going to make that decision and move on. I'm going to keep it this way because I love that shape too much and I don't want to lose it. I'm going to finish this piece out, and I'm going to learn what I can from it using the other styles that I've got here. Give it a blonde character that I don't usually do. Try and push myself in different ways. And then the next piece I do, I'm going to go back to doing an extreme close-up, and I'm not going to let myself off the hook. So I'm going to put in a stopgap for myself and say, we're going to leave it this way. And then next piece I do, I'm going to go ahead and push it a little bit more. Hailey says, look at it with fresh eyes later. Yes, but also that can be dangerous because I can justify stuff easier later than I can right now when my conviction is at its highest. But yes, it's always good to come back to stuff later. Usually one of these pieces, if it takes me, say, 5 hours, I'll do it over the course of 2 days because I don't want to get so absorbed in what I'm doing that I don't give it the space that it needs and things. All right. Last question here, and then I think we're going to wrap up. And like I said, I'm going to go get food because it's lunchtime here. Yo Melotus says, what's the best software for starting animation? We have an Animator Island article about that. You probably won't like the answer, though, because the answer is whatever animation software you're willing to use. To be perfectly honest, when you're starting out in animation, you need to learn principles. You need to learn foundations that are going to carry with you, or you're going to carry with you throughout your entire career. So the software at that point is much less important. However, this is a big one. What you don't want to have happen is that you get so dependent on one piece of software that you like are doomed without it. So for example, again, this is a learn from my mistakes moment. I learned Adobe Flash, which back then was Macromedia Flash, way a million years ago when I was learning animation. And I became so dependent on the way that program worked that I couldn't move on to other programs or other methods. Now, the other really nice thing about it is I also learned on paper. So a lot of the principles that I learned were done on paper, and I didn't have to worry about software at all. So that's why I always recommend, if you can, learn animation on paper. But it takes forever, and it's very hard, and most people don't do it. So I understand if most people aren't going to. However, that being said, just don't get dependent on the program. Like, don't fall in love with it so much that you can't move on to other things. And this is something that Ferdinand is so good at. Ferdinand, if you just put a new program down in front of him, he'll just go learn it. And he'll almost delight in learning it. Whereas me, that's like a nightmare. I don't want to learn a new program. I just like what I already have. So I don't have a direct answer for you to go download this program, but I will say try a few different ones, but worry less about the program in the beginning and more about getting those fundamentals and those foundations built, because that's what's really going to serve you. And you can learn animation using a flip book, right? Just a couple pieces of paper, even two. You just flip through them and you'll be able to work on your principles. You won't have to worry about software at all. But we have software, so we might as well use it. In that case, find one that you like and you find some good tutorials on. I know Ferdinand right now is using OpenTunes with a Z, I believe, and seems to like it. So you might check out OpenTunes. It's free, so you could at least try it. I think it's free. It's open, so it should be. But just don't get yourself bogged down by a specific program. That's all. That's my biggest advice for when you're starting out. Do not get so obsessed with one piece of software that you can never adapt to any others, because it's just not good for you. Procreate even has some little animation features. So you might use Procreate if you have Apple products. All right. That's it for me today. Thanks for hanging out and chiming in. Highly, again, always with the really good comments. I didn't get to mirroring this particular drawing. Let's do it for fun just before I sign off, huh? Let's mirror this puppy and see if it's horrific. Oops, wrong one. So we flip it horizontally, and yeah, it's not terrible. There's a couple things I'm noticing specifically now that it's mirrored, but it's not the worst. I like it better the first way. But yeah, it's not the worst thing. And then I'm going to have to go back in after this and, figure out where the new eye lines are and stuff. Because I'm going to have to change where the eyes are. And no, probably not that. Anyway, we'll get to that possibly next time. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. Golden Crow says, I never watch live vids, but this one was really good. Have a pleasant lunch. Thanks. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. There are some non-live ones all over on the Animator Island TV YouTube channel, so feel free to check those out. And I will be back with another live stream, hopefully next week. And we'll go from there. I don't know if it'll still be this piece. I'm probably going to keep working on this piece a little bit later today, just because I'm enthusiastic about it. But we'll get to the next one, and we'll go from there. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I'm JK from Animator Island, and I will see you next time.